Okay, we got the record going, and let's go ahead and get started. So uh, welcome everybody. We can't see you, but hopefully you can see us. I see now we have 16, 17 participants in the room 18, so it's going up. And the numbers go, I say, so it looks like we're still letting people in. Let's wait just a minute or two. Jill, can you see the participants down at the bottom of your screen too? The number incrementing?
Yes.
Okay, so I see 25 right now. I think we had 61 registered, so we'll wait just a couple more minutes and see if other people need to be let in before we get started.
Sounds great.
Okay. I think looks like we stabilized around 26, so we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to Creating a Book, the process from start to finish. I'm Jim Brammer, treasurer on the ASMP Los Angeles board, and co-hosting this event with me tonight is Jasen Laks in the back room, backstage, also a member of the ASMP LA board, and our presenter this evening is Jill Pater. And more about Jill in just a few minutes. But first, a word from our sponsor. This evening's workshop is brought to you by the American Society for Media Photographers and the ASMP Los Angeles chapter. If you're an ASMP member in the greater Los Angeles area, please consider joining our board and working with us to plan more activities and events like this one. We're always looking to diversify our programming, and we welcome all areas of photography to represent more perspectives and interests. If you're not an ASMP member, please consider joining. The American Society for Media Photographers is an association of imaging professionals that includes photojournalists, architectural, underwater, culinary, and advertising photographers, as well as videographers, filmmakers, and other specialists. We're a worldwide organization with well over 4,000 members in more than 22 countries. In addition to being a champion for photographers and creators' rights, your ASMP membership offers networking connections, discounts from our corporate sponsors, copyright protection tools, the ASMP Academy powered by Sony, your Find a Photographer profile on our website, weekly offerings of one-on-one legal and business clinics to help grow your business, and much, much more. If you're interested in learning about membership, please visit asmp.org. Now, a teaser to get you to stick around until the end. As we wrap up after Jill's presentation, I'll be providing some exciting details about a truly amazing portrait competition that we have coming up with where ASMP is collaborating with Time Magazine. Just to whet your appetite, a total of 30 people will win cash prizes totaling more than $16,000. And get this, the winner will receive a 3-month mentorship with the photo editors of Time and a 1-day paid assignment from Time. So it sounds pretty exciting to me. In fact, I might even enter myself, but stick around till the end and I'll give you all the details. Finally, some administrative details before we dive in. First, our legal people tell me that I need to advise you that this event is being recorded. The recording will be available on the Academy page of the ASMP website for members to view in about a week. Next, regarding Q&A, in order to keep this session interactive, we'd like to answer your questions in real time as we go through the presentation. So please put your questions in the Q&A area, not in the chat section, because that in fact has been disabled, so you won't be able to use it. We don't want you talking about behind our backs, okay? As your questions come in, Jasen is going to be monitoring them in the backstage area, and he'll pass them along to Jill and myself, and we will get them answered real time for you. And we will also take some pauses along the way, and we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A as well. So keep those questions coming. Okay, enough with the administrative minutia. Let's get to the real reason you guys are here. We are extremely fortunate and grateful to have an amazing presenter this evening, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about her now. Jill Pater is an award-winning creator and producer. She has worked in more than 100 countries on assignment, specializing in visual stories of architecture, design, travel, and gastronomy, and she's the founder of Gilliard Moshe, a creative agency. She holds a master's degree from the London School of Economics and a diploma in photography from the University of the Arts, London, where she graduated with distinction. Jill is the first architectural photographer to be awarded the Fulbright Specialist Grant by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. She has published 35 books and is the best-selling author of The Creative's Guide to Staying Inspired and Doing the Work You Love. She's a featured expert on CNN, Travel and Leisure, Business Insider, HuffPost, MSN, and the London Evening Standard. In her free time, do you really have free time with all that, Jill? Are you kidding me? She serves as a consultant for creative education at the University of the Arts, London. And now, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Jill Pater.
Thank you so much, Jim, and a huge thanks to the whole ASMP team who put this on tonight, all of our friends backstage who are working tirelessly behind the scenes to make this go on tonight. And very special thanks to all of you who are coming out to watch this either in real time or later in the recording. I'm so excited to share this with you. I feel like I have acquired all this useless knowledge over the years of being a photographer and creating books. So I'm very excited to share it with my core audience, my favorite people, which are other photographers. So thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. You'll still see me in the icon on the side. But as Jim said, we want to keep this as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions along the way, please hit the Q&A icon on the screen and ask those as we go along. We'll also have plenty of time for Q&A after if you want to ask more detailed or specific questions about a project you're thinking about or something that you want to pursue in the future. This is very much an overview to kind of get you started and whet your appetite for creating books. There are potentials to do future webinars if you're interested on things like print production, on publishing, on marketing books. But we wanted to just kind of give you the fundamentals and foundation, see where your interests lie. And of course, if there is more interest, we're very open to doing more sessions along this line. So without further ado, I'm going to pop into the presentation. Jim, can you see that full screen?
Yep, got it.
Okay, great. So creating a book, we're going to go over the process tonight from start to finish. And the goal tonight is to really get you thinking about how to create a book in its most minimum viable product form. We're taking a line out of the Silicon Valley book there, but making it as easy and simple and straightforward as possible to get you on to the next step. So the goals of this workshop are threefold. One is, first and foremost, is to inspire you to create a book. I know most of you who are photographers on this call listening to this were probably like I was a few years ago, with huge hard drives all over the place, full of photos that may or may not be cataloged correctly. You may not even remember anymore what you've shot. And I just know in my heart of hearts that you have many books hidden in there that I want to pull out. So it's first and foremost to inspire you to create a book. The second goal is to simplify the process. Again, getting down to that minimum viable product. What are the main things you need? Obviously, we can always add bells and whistles on later as we go on. And then last but not least, it's to expand your idea of what publishing is. So we typically think about traditional publishing, right? Which is creating big coffee table books, sending them to a printer, having 10,000 printed or more, and shipping them out. But printing in 2023 is very different than it once was. Publishing is very different than what it once was. And there were so many ways to publish books, both digitally and print-wise, that we'd be remiss if we just kind of kept thinking of publishing in that narrow avenue. Just a little bit about me. Jim gave you an overview, but I've been a photographer for 20 years. Don't let the Zoom filter fool you. Older than I look. I've been a boutique publisher for 9 years. I started my own after I did my first books. I fell in love with the process and kind of became a bibliophile, book addict. And now everywhere I go, all I think about are books and what kind of books I can do next. And so in that time, I've created over 35 books, and I currently have quite a few more in production now. So it's a slippery slope. Your first book is definitely the hardest, but after that, I can assure you, you will be giving birth to these new projects with great ease. going to start by showing you a couple of samples. Now, when I think of photographers and books, of course, I think of the greatest, the writing of the greatest, the big tripod. These are the massive coffee table books. I think the first one Taschen did was with Helmut Newton, and they literally come on their own tripod. They're limited edition books. Annie Leibovitz has one as well. She actually just came out with a series. This is actually the same book with 4 different covers. And so these are sold as very high end. They're kind of really like custom bound prints, books, like a set of custom bound prints in a book form. Something very special. They have value, they acquire value. And that's something in the publishing world that has changed quite a bit. I'm sure many of you have purchased coffee table books over the years, and they may end up at Goodwill or Salvation Army. We just don't have the space for them anymore. So the mass production of books, particularly coffee table books and photography books, has gone down. But the limited edition arena for these types of books is very, very hot, and people love it. And I think it lends itself beautifully to photographers at any stage of the game, whether you're starting out and this is your first book, or you're a very advanced, experienced photographer and want to do something very special and custom. But again, the idea here is that you're using the highest quality materials. You're not printing masses of books. You're using a more sustainable model where you're printing fewer books, you're selling them, and you're putting everything into the process that you can. So it's a real piece of art. There are a couple more done by Taschen. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Sebastian Salgado, who has not only books, but a huge fine art print market that goes along with it. And on the other side is one of my favorite. It's a gorgeous book by Lynn Goldsmith and Patti Smith, a beautiful, beautiful book if you're into music photography. And then these are a couple newer ones. This one kind of made me laugh. Taschen just came out with an Arnold Schwarzenegger book. And it seems to be kind of a trend in the publishing industry where it's a cross collaboration between, where I'm guessing Arnold Schwarzenegger's agents kind of help put this together. And Jim, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are not seeing your slides change. We're still looking at the title slide.
Oh. Huh.
We have a technical problem, and I have to apologize to Lorraine because she brought this up, and I said, well, I don't think she's changed slides yet, but I think you have actually.
Yeah, I've gone through quite a few.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure how to fix that. Because I'm seeing them change on my slide. Let me see. I'm going to stop the share. And I'll try again and see if this helps. Do you see a new one now?
I do, yes.
Okay.
And just change it for us one more time. Make sure you're going forward. Yeah, okay, so now I see about 20 years and samples. So yeah,
okay,
I think we're good.
Good, thank you so much for stopping me. So I'll just go back over this.
Thanks to the Q&A for that heads up. We appreciate it. Sorry.
Yes, thank you very much. So just to go back real briefly, these are the big tripod books Helmut Newton and Annie Leibovitz have done with Taschen. They're limited edition. Again, this is Annie Leibovitz, same book, 4 different covers. Again, it's a great marketing and PR piece for her. And these are the 2 books, Sebastian Salgado and one of my personal favorite music books, Lynn Goldsmith and Patti Smith. And then, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger. So this is kind of a newer trend that we're seeing with Taschen, Osseline, kind of the high-end publishers of coffee table books, where they're doing collaborations. I just saw one with Riviera Yachts as well, where it seems to be where there's a collaboration, meaning that Taschen isn't necessarily going out and creating the editorial for this. They're working with somebody probably on Arnold Schwarzenegger's team to create a joint book together. Probably, I'm guessing, for Arnold's marketing and PR efforts. And then this is one I love. This is one that Taschen does every couple of years. It's a Polaroid book with various artists. Again, just to show you kind of the bandwidth of some of the ideas. The books that we're going to be kind of talking about, the process I'm going to take you through, it will help you create a prototype for any kind of book. Again, whether it's just digital, could even be a social media campaign type book onto a print piece. But they all start out and kind of go through the same process. And then last but not least, these are a few of mine. I even have can't even hold it one to share with you tonight. The thing about these books, about coffee table books and about size, which is what we'll talk about, is they are very heavy and they make it difficult to transport. So something to think about too is how you, when it comes to what you're creating, is how, how you're going to actually distribute this to people. When I go into meetings with clients, I have a rollerboard suitcase to bring the books because they're so heavy. So just an important kind of thing to think about. So the next big question is, why would you want to create a book in the first place? Like, why put yourself through this immense process? Well, I think in the day of iPhone 15s, where everybody has 48 megapixel cameras in their pocket, it's always going to be helpful for us to distinguish ourselves as professional photographers. And one way to do that is creating very strong narrative pieces that are different from our commercial work or your website, that show breadth and depth, that show passion for a particular subject, and the ability to cover something kind of in a different way. We work, and the world kind of thrives on visual stories. We're less and less textual, so that lends itself beautifully to photo books. It's a great way, obviously, to promote your work, as you can see with some of the photographers' books that featured Annie Leibovitz, Sebastian Salgado, especially if you have a fine art background as well, and you want to sell fine art prints. The books go hand in hand with that as well, very nicely. It's also a great way, just personally, a great way to help define your vision. And sometimes even just, it's a cathartic process that you go through when you create a book, going through your files, going through your archives, coming up with just different ideas. It helps you see yourself differently as a photographer and maybe your specialty. It can also help you sometimes regain inspiration in a certain area, or just develop a different, a more defined sense of self in your work. It also makes it very easy, again, to then promote this. You have social media, you have all different channels that you can kind of promote something different than your everyday commercial work. And then last but not least, it's a great opportunity to share what you do with a larger audience and sometimes get attention, right? A new book is very exciting. So sending that to art directors, photo editors, art buyers, potential clients. It's a wonderful way to get yourself out there in an aspect that's new and exciting. I've also done books for very personal reasons. It's gifts to clients that I've worked with over a long period of time as a thank you gift. And that's something that clients, especially very wealthy clients who have it all, or you have friends or family who have it all and you don't know what to create for them, they all love books. And so I've done it on behalf of clients for their clients, like literally limited edition, one coffee table book that's theirs. They get one copy and then one goes in a safe somewhere. It's great, again, for friends and family, or even just yourself. Actually, one of my best-selling books that I was never intending on publishing. It was just a travel memoir, so I could remember where I had been and where the stories and where I was going. I was never intending on publishing the book, and I had shown it at a few different places. Excuse me, yes, Jim.
We do have a question, Jill.
Sure.
If you'll pardon the interruption from Jim in Seattle. He says, "Do prospective clients like big, heavy books?" Disclaimer: I like big, heavy books.
Well, it depends on the client, but yes, they do. They love it. I mean, I think books are, for a lot of clients, a vanity project. I have a lot of my clients have purchased my limited edition books, which are not cheap. So I think what makes it attractive to a client is that it's ultimately a piece of art. It's limited. It's not mass produced. It's not something you can buy at Costco, right? It's something very special, very artistic. The binding is custom hand stitched. The paper is printed on custom archival paper. Like, everything is thought about and detailed, and you can't get it anywhere else, which is what makes these books very attractive to a lot of people. And I will talk about as well doing books for your clients towards the end of the presentation, but you don't have to do a big heavy book either. You can do small books, you can do digital books, you can do all different types of things. You can do bound box of prints. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a heavy coffee table book, but I know as photographers, we tend to love them, and anybody interested in the arts also tends to be very keen towards them as well. So thank you for the question, Jim. So as I was saying, you can do, in that same thread, you can do a custom book for a client, which I've done several times, and it's been a very big hit, right? If you've worked for a client for a number of years, you can easily kind of probably gather up some images, put them together, put them into a narrative format, and gift them with that. It's a great way to say thank you for being a client for all these years, or I love working with you. And in the case of some of my clients, that book has led them, now they want to do their own books. They want to do very special things, very custom things in the book arena, because they already have one. They want to keep adding to their bookshelf. So yes, to answer again your question, they are great vanity pieces and great marketing pieces. And also keep in mind, if you do a physical book, that book is sitting somewhere. It could be if it's sitting in an ad agency or sitting in your clients and they're looking at it daily. So it's kind of, printing is a lost art, and it's something that's physical in a very digital world, so, and tactile. And so I think it has more power now in a sense than it ever did. So the first things that we want to consider when you think about doing a book is really, who is your audience? Is this a book you're doing for yourself, just to kind of as a legacy piece for yourself? It could be for a family member. It could be for a client. It could be for the mass public. But your audience, who it is, knowing your audience, knowing what they like, knowing who they are, is really going to fuel a lot of the design decisions you make on your book. And it's really going to then fuel into the next consideration, which is your goal. And these two things together are going to, again, determine so many of the big decisions you have to make, right? So for example, if I have an architecture client I'm doing a book for, it's probably not going to be a small book, right? Because architecture lends itself to a larger format. And if it's for architects, I know that they're very, very designed. They notice every single detail, so it better be perfect. It's going to cost me a lot of money. It's probably going to take me a lot of time to make it absolutely perfect, because if there's anything off, they will be the first ones to notice. On the flip side, they will appreciate all the upgraded materials. They'll be looking at it, upside down and inside out, all the color palettes, everything used, and the design as well. On the other hand, if it's a book that's just a personal book, I want to archive some work and just kind of create something, my goal is just to please myself, basically, and to have something that I can archive. And I may want to, in that case, try some new materials that I haven't used, maybe some recycled papers, use a different cover style, try a different size, and also maybe kind of experiment a little bit with budget in terms of printing. Like in the past, I've always done, more expensive printing. What does something in a more, uncoated magazine look like in this format? So it may be more experimental. The other two big considerations are, of course, budget. And again, you don't have to have a lot of money to do a book. You can actually probably do most of this with resources that you have that are free, and with the help of other photographers or other people in the photo community. On the flip side, though, if you do have a lot of money and you want to spend it on books, I can certainly help you do that as well. You can go from, a very simple digital piece to very, very, very high-end printed pieces, custom bindings, custom cases. The customization that you can do around books is a whole art in and of itself. So again, there's a massive range. And regardless of where you are at in your budget, I do recommend kind of starting in this prototype phase, where you start with the digital and then you kind of move to print, just because as you go through the process, you're probably going to change your mind. And who knows, maybe you get a windfall of cash, or cash goes out the other way and you need to change your budget. You at least have this prototype. You have a way that you're thinking about this and want to produce this. And then last but definitely not least is time. We tend to overrate money and budget and underrate how much time we spend on things. And books can take some time. Probably some of the aspects of creating a book actually take less time than you're thinking. What takes more time is some of the learning curve, perhaps collaborating with the printer, perhaps refining the book. That can sometimes take a while, but it is an investment of time, depending on how you're going to approach it. Publishing options, I'm just going to touch on these real briefly. This is, again, something we can open up to Q&A. It's really, we could spend multiple sessions on any of these topics. But publishing, you really have three main options. One is self, which is kind of what we're doing tonight, talking about the self-publishing process. And even if you were to do an indie publisher or traditional publisher, you'd still probably want to go through this process and create your own prototype so that you have a solid presentation to give to the powers that be to pitch your project. So regardless of who you publish with, this would still kind of be at least your initial process. There are advantages and disadvantages of all of them. I mean, publishing has changed so much in the last 5 years. And once upon a time, it was, publishers were God. And if you got published by Taschen or Rizzoli, your world was complete. You make tons of money. It's not really like that anymore. Publishers do a lot less than they used to, and they expect you to bring a lot to the table and also give up a lot of control, which is why I started my own publishing company. I'm kind of like to be in control of my books. So I think self-publishing, at least for the purposes of this seminar, is kind of the way to go. There are great indie publishers that specialize in photography books. If you have an idea and you really want that support, they're available. And then traditional publishers, very hard to get into. As I discussed, the market for the big coffee table books has gone down. So if you're not a celebrity name like Annie Leibovitz or Helmut Newton, it's harder to get into that market. Not impossible, but it may not necessarily suit your goal. So it always goes back to the goal and your audience. And you probably have, I'm guessing, a better hit with your direct audience than many of these publishing companies do, especially if you're doing it, you're working, say you're a food photographer and you want to get more food advertising clients, you probably know who those people are and can directly send something to them that's in that vein that a traditional publisher, might not do, might not touch, and wouldn't have those contacts anyway. So getting into the process. So the first part is really the pre-production. What do we need to do to get there? We talked a little bit about your goal. So again, the goal, if your goal is to get new work, if it's to do something artistic, maybe you're a fine art photographer and you want to approach galleries with this book and use it as a way to get gallery shows, that's going to define a lot of the other decisions you make. The next big one is coming up with themes. So what I recommend is, if you're starting from scratch, is just coming up with all the possible ideas you have and doing a big brainstorm, not narrowing it down too far, and just keeping working on it until you have, maybe a list of 20, 30 ideas. And then day by day, maybe then to start scratching some off or circling the ones that you like the best, that you think that excite you the most. And I think that's a big thing in the bookmaking process. If it's not something you're inspired about, it's probably not going to be inspiring to other people. So it's very important, especially given that this process can be long and can take some time. It's very important that it's something that you feel desire to do, you feel attached to, and you feel inspired by, because that energy will take you through the process. If you're not inspired by it and you're doing it because you think, oh, this is just a good marketing book, I don't recommend it. I don't think it'll have as much reach and as much impact as something that you truly love, even if it is a bit less commercial or a bit less obvious. The next step is really so you have your ideas, you've narrowed it down to maybe like 5 or 6, create folders on your computer and just start copying photos that go into those themes. So just doing kind of a photo dump, like you think about all the shoots you've done, just working through and see what you have for each of those themes. And you'll start to see, I'm sure you have a lot more than you think you have in your archives. When I started publishing books, I started with 5 ideas, and I thought, God, if I even get if one of these books comes to fruition, I'll be happy. And it turned out like all 5 came through. Then I had 8 new ideas right away and turned around 8 more books. So like I said, it's a slippery slope. But you probably have way more content than you think you have just sitting there, right, on your desktop. So start pulling images and start, getting a feel for what you have. Then the biggest first decision you have to make when creating a book is the size and format. So that again goes back to your goal, your audience, and also your budget. Because once you start the design process, you can't change the size. And then the format too is this going to be a digital book or a print book? Obviously, if you're doing a print book, you'll automatically have the digital file as well, which can be easily converted into different digital formats for book publishing. But size matters, right? It's the biggest thing. And it's something that you don't want to just, if you're in one of your software programs, you don't want to just kind of say, oh, maybe I'll pick this size without knowing what it is. The best way to get ideas on size is to either pull books that you already have that you love the size and feel of, or go to an old-fashioned bookstore and find coffee table books and just pull the different sizes and really measure them out with a measuring tape, right? Get very precise, the thickness, the size, and the width. It's not something you want to leave until you get to the printer, because if you get your first book back or your first dummy book back, you'll be very surprised if you don't do this work in the pre-production phase. So size and feel is really important. Also, the thickness, which is going to be determined by the number of pages and the paper type. So just giving that a feel. Obviously, if it's digital, it's a little bit different. You'll still have a size, though. You may want to push this through social media. You may have a special format for that. Or it could just be like a regular 8.5 by 11 that you're doing digitally, but that will also kind of affect your layout and the size of the book. Usually for like a digital piece, it's not going to be massive. For a coffee table book, you can have quite a few more pages. And I'll just open it up there if there are any questions that have come through, Jim.
We don't, excuse me, we don't have anything new at this time.
Okay.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you. So now that we have our goal, our theme, a size, we can begin. So I'll first talk a little bit about software programs that you can use. So the holy grail of book design is InDesign, Adobe InDesign. Now, that's not a program that everybody knows well, and it is a little bit complicated, but it is by I'm looking for something a little bit easier to use, a little bit more friendly. Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom has a bookmaking. They have different formats you can use. You will be, when you use some of these alternative softwares, you will be a little bit limited in what you can do. But if it's just about getting you started out and getting something into layout, it'll certainly do the job. You can use Photoshop. It's a little bit cumbersome. I don't recommend it, but it is possible. And even other softwares like Blurb, which is an online printer, which I don't necessarily recommend their printing, but they do have a software to create books where you can actually kind of create the book, and then you can pay a very nominal fee to have it sent to you as a high resolution PDF. So if you're using it just to create a prototype, those are great, easy ways to do it. Otherwise, InDesign is going to be kind of really the best way to do it. It allows you to make the most changes and really craft it the way you want to. And so the first thing is layout. And the beauty of photo books really is that the more simple, the more minimalist they are, the more beautiful the book, hands down. My favorite photo books are generally fashion photo books. They have very, very little text. They have 4 to 5 layouts max, right? So this isn't a hard graphic design job, right? You basically have the standard 4 tend to be a full page bleed, a full double page bleed, a double page with a border, a single page bleed, a single page with a border, and then you can, if you want a 5th one, you can easily come up with another option, but very, very simple. And that's again, the beauty of photo books. They're not hard to lay out. They really aren't, I promise you. And what I tend to do is once I pick out those different layouts, I plug them in and I just start populating, right? I'm not overly refining it. I just start populating the file with the images that I have on that theme or subject. Again, it's not the refining process. You kind of want to just see how it's starting to feel, how certain images look, kind of getting maybe a sense of order where you can move things around. The next big thing is, yes, Jim.
So we have a couple questions. Is this a good time to take a couple?
Absolutely.
Okay, sorry for the interruption. We have a Zoom user, that's their name. It says, were books self-published or by publishers? Were your books self-published or by publishers? And what do you think of print on demand?
So my books, well, in my case, they're both because I own the publishing company and I publish them through that company. So it's yes to both. I have also published books through publishers as well, but all my coffee table books are done through my own company, through my self-published. And they were all the print versions of those books were print on demand and limited edition. I think that is definitely the way to go. These books are very, very expensive, especially if you do, again, a book with all the bells and whistles. They're very, very expensive to print. And I also believe in, from a sustainability practice standpoint, that is the best way to do it. I mean, some people will print overseas and print thousands of books, but ultimately a lot of them, unfortunately, will end up in the dumpster or in a closet for years to come. It's a waste of material and resources. So I'm a huge fan of print on demand because it ultimately gives you the best quality for the budget you have. But when I say print on demand, I'm talking about working with a local printer who, you go there, you do the press checks, and they, you may order 1 at a time, 2 at a time, 10, 15, however many you want. But on demand, I think, is the way to go for these types of books. And then,
Okay.
Jim, was there a second question in that?
Yeah, we have a couple more if you have
Okay.
time.
Sure.
Nancy would like to know, when organizing for theme, is it better to make copies of images in a folder or just concentrate on keywording?
I would say I like to put them in a folder so that at least when I open up the folder, I can see the images and see how they fit in and see everything that I have in one place. But it's really up to you. If you find it's easier to do that via keywording, by all means. You're much more, I give you a lot of credit because you're a much more organized person than I am. My keywords kind of come and go on images. So I usually like to go back and just kind of put it in a folder. And then that way, when you're creating the book in the software, you can kind of easily move them in and out and see if it fits into the book layout.
Right. I think I'm with you on just collecting them in a folder. I'm not that organized.
Yeah, I know. I have big hopes for myself one day about keywording, but it never seems to happen.
Okay. Amy would like to know, how much say does the author usually have in what the size of the book will be when working with a traditional publisher?
That's a great question, Amy. It's when you work with a traditional publisher, the biggest challenge that they have is cost, right? And so, like, when I've taken some of my books that I've created, I've taken them to Tasha and Rizzoli and Asseline, and the first thing they say to me is, we could never afford to print this book, right? So a lot of the size, and you've probably noticed over the years, they've come down in size. Aside from the big tripod books that I've showed you, the average coffee table book size has come, it's like shrinking. Every year I go to the book fairs, it's like 1 inch smaller, 1 inch smaller. So you have collaboration, but ultimately they're going to have more of a say. I mean, they have a dedicated team of designers and lots of people, and people who really specialize in the market and printing, and will have a very distinct idea. And so when push comes to shove, they generally have, again, unless you're like a very, very big name published author, they will probably have more control than you in that decision-making process. Oops, Jim, I think you're on mute.
Well, thanks for that. One more from Jose, who says, with so many DIY publishers out there marketing to us, do you have any suggestions on who might be ideal, or who we should stay away from? I say this considering I have made a couple test projects with some of these publishers where I was very unsatisfied with the quality and capacity to truly reproduce the photos.
Yes, I would say, I mean, honestly, for the purpose of this workshop, and the reason I even started my publishing company in the first place is because I wasn't happy with what was out there. And that's a real challenge. I mean, even if you look at some of the top publishers of coffee table books, they'll have beautiful covers and beautiful cases. But when you look at the print quality, the binding quality, it's not great. And the paper quality, it's not great. So if you want a high quality product, you're in a much better position. You may think, well, I've never done a book before. Well, even as a photographer, as somebody with a great eye, you're in a much better position to do this than a lot of these publishers. And that's why I'm a really big fan of kind of creating your own books and really creating them the way you want to make them, because they don't have the budget and they don't have the materials to really print this way anymore. So I don't unfortunately have recommendations. I mean, that like I said, that's how I got into this business myself, is I just kind of started doing it and liked what I could produce compared to what those people could produce. So I think, especially if you happen to live in one of the major metropolitan areas, you'll have access to great printers and just great people in the photo community that can you will help actualize your vision much better than some of the indie or traditional publishers.
Got it. And a follow-on from Jose, additionally, what can we do to determine if a publisher is a good fit for us?
I think, I mean, ideally you could talk to other people who, I mean, the best thing would be to speak to somebody who's also published with them before and see what their input is. That will give you a very actualized review. You do want to be careful, because as you're putting together this book, it might be your greatest work, right? And so you want to be careful about rights. You want to really go through the fine print with them and sit down and ask them all the questions you have, brainstorm even more questions than you have, and think about all the contingencies of the book. Quality production, as Amy had asked before, about who gets to decide, who gets to decide what size it is, who gets to make the final decisions. And also, importantly, if there's a problem, who fixes it and who handles it. Also, distribution is a big thing. Ultimately, photo books are not huge money generators. It's not to say that you can't make a profit from doing a photo book, but really it's probably better to approach it as a marketing expense, and of which you'll get a return in other ways. And so when you look at it from that way, if the publisher isn't making you money and really getting you kind of the audience you want, then what's the point? But you definitely want to have a very in-depth conversation with them. And really, make sure for certain your rights, how long they have them, how republishing works, how, what kind of say you'll have in the print and quality of the production process.
Good. Okay. Thank you for that. That's all we have for now.
Sure. Great. So tapping back into this, so the next thing after layout, which again, like I said, I think you'll actually find this process easier than you think. Just getting your images into the book layout without spending too much time, worrying about the order right away, or worrying about if it's the right kind of layout for that particular image, because you'll have plenty of time to refine that. And sometimes it's better, I find, I'll work on books for maybe 30 minutes a day and then go back the next day, and it helps you kind of refine your process. The next item is really typography. Again, these are very visual books, minimal text. So the next big thing is anything written on the book, including like the cover title, your name, any type of inside title pages, introduction, the text. You're going to want to have beautiful typography, so beautiful fonts for that. And I'm going to chat you some resources, or Jasen in our backstage will chat you them at some point with some resources for that. I usually just use myfonts.com. You can kind of type in the text you want. Like I usually start with the title of the book, and it'll kind of show you what it looks like in every single font. But typography is very, very important, again, because in these books, it should really be mainly your images. And so the minimal words do matter, and the text should be very visual. It's an important thing, and it doesn't have to be difficult. You can pick 1 or 2 fonts for the book and be done. But I would definitely spend some time picking out ones that you really like and really fit the theme of your book. And then next we have writing. So writing, again, with these books, very minimal. Usually you have an introduction. You may have like a back page with some type of contact information or an about. You may have photo captions, but generally speaking, photo books have very minimal text, which is great. I also do text-based books, and I can tell you they're infinitely harder. I skip back to my desk when I get to work on photo books. They're so much easier. But with writing, of course, you want an editor. If you're writing it yourself, you want somebody overlooking your work, just to make sure it's cleaned and pinned. Going back slightly to typography again, you can work with a graphic designer. You probably have there are a lot of people in the photo community who are great designers. You don't necessarily need a designer, but it can be helpful for placing, for doing your cover. If it's the first cover you've done, or you're not comfortable doing typography with an image, graphic designer can be of immense help. And it's not a massive expense, especially if you have ideas, you have themes, you kind of know what you're looking for. They'll be able to help place the text perfectly, and it's really not a massive expense, and certainly well worth it if it's in your budget.
Okay. Questions?
Yes.
From Gay, do you recommend marketing and selling your work with an ebook?
So yes, so I have, so all my books, I have a digital version and a limited edition print version. Digital ebooks are great. One of the challenges with a photo ebook is that it needs to be fixed width. So unlike if you read Kindle, for example, and it's a text-based book, it automatically generates the text to the next page. With ebooks for photography, for photo books, they have to be fixed width, which means the user sees the double page spread at all times. So I think it's a great, if you're doing a print book, you automatically have a digital version of it. And I think it's a great way to give other people access to it. How you do that is up to you. If it's something you want to give free of charge to clients, or you want to do a little teaser version of an ebook, that's a great marketing thing. Or maybe you just want to get your work out there and you offer it up that way. But I think ebooks are good. It's not, it's a very different product than a physical book, which is tangible and people tend to like because it shows more of the artistic quality of the images, right? We're photographers, we're old school tactile people. But I think it's a great option. It goes very well with a print piece. And you can also do them on your own as well. You can charge for them, but they tend to work better as marketing teasers. It doesn't have to be the full book, especially if it's a very large digital book. You'd probably want to maybe cut it down to like 30 pages or so. And that can be a great marketing piece or a teaser for the print book if you choose to do it alongside a print book.
Okay. Thank you for that. Nancy is asking, which software do you use for layout? What do you recommend?
So InDesign, Adobe InDesign is the holy grail for book design. So highly, highly recommend InDesign. If you don't know InDesign, it's like any of the Adobe. Unfortunately, all the Adobe software is hard to learn initially, but once you learn it, you'll find it's much easier to make changes and to keep certain things consistent in the book. If you don't have InDesign, or you don't want to learn InDesign, which I completely understand, Adobe Lightroom also has, they have formats for books that you can use. It's not as malleable as InDesign, where you can kind of create anything, but it's a great starting point. And then I think I also mentioned that even software programs like Blurb, which I don't recommend for printing, blurb.com, but they do have book layouts that you can use, and you can actually create a book, and then you can pay to have a high resolution PDF sent to yourself, and you can use that if you're just trying to experiment with the layout. Those are options. Photoshop is also an option, but it's a little bit tedious to create a book in Photoshop, and it's hard to keep it consistent because you're ultimately just doing it page by page, and you can't see everything at once. But highly, highly recommend InDesign. Okay.
So now I have to learn InDesign. Ugh.
Yes. Yeah, put that on your to-do list.
So Amy is asking, I have been told that with on demand, there is not as much contrast, as the color black doesn't come through as well. I'm under the impression that it is not archival, and also seems very expensive per unit. Can you please speak to this?
Sure. So it depends exactly what you're referring to with on demand, because if you're talking about putting your book on Amazon and then have Amazon print it on demand, yeah, that's definitely, you're going to have print issues, right? Because those go to all different printers, who's going to be printing it, and the client will receive it not knowing. But when I work on demand, I'm working with a very high-end printer who's based in the Los Angeles area. And if anything needs, we do lots of test prints. You can calibrate things however you want. So if you want to pull the blacks to get more contrast, that's something the printer could absolutely do, and they can do it on demand. You are correct in suggesting that when you print on demand, especially if you're printing one or two offs, they are going to be more expensive per unit because you're not printing masses of them. But I think ultimately you'll find the quality that you can achieve that way is going to be higher. And also, you know, in a world where coffee table books are kind of diminishing, you know, the middle range are diminishing and the higher end books are doing well. I think you're better served kind of doing the best piece you possibly can and selling it for more money, or if it's for yourself, having it as a legacy piece, than doing something that's kind of middle of the road and cheaper. Because even that version is still going to be somewhat costly. It's not going to be cheap when you're printing for color. But they absolutely can on demand. Our printers printing on demand, meaning one-offs. Custom printer can absolutely print on archival papers, and you have tons of choices on papers, covers, bindings. They have the whole 9 yards. But if you're referring to like an Amazon shop, no, you have very limited options. And I would definitely not print anything photo-wise via like Amazon KDP.
Right. And Jim is asking, when should we hire a designer who knows fonts and a writer who knows those pesky word things?
When should you hire one? Well, if it's not something, I mean, again, the writing on these books is very limited. You technically don't even have to have an introduction, but it's nice to have something. I mean, generally people don't. I mean, when's the last time you opened a photo book and read the introduction? Probably never, right? You're skipping through the photos, but it is nice to have something. So if that's not in your wheelhouse and it's really something you absolutely do not want to do, then I would, you know, certainly hire somebody to help you. When it comes to the typography, I always recommend like playing with it a little bit yourself first and having an idea of what you want, or maybe more importantly, what you don't want in the look of your text. But again, if it's something that you're totally not interested in or you're completely overwhelmed by all means, hire a designer. Again, there isn't, when it comes to picking out like the typefaces for your book, that's something a designer would love to do. They tend to love to work with photographers, and these are somewhat easy projects because you're picking out one thing, it goes on the cover, it may go on a title page. It's not a very tedious design project if you're doing the interior layout. So neither one of those things I would say are overly costly. So if you find them overwhelming, you know, certainly hit up people in the photo community for recommendations, or myself, and hire somebody to do it. If it's stopping you from moving forward, then absolutely hire somebody.
Great, thank you for that. We have several others. Do you want to continue with questions, or would you like to go back to the presentation?
Sure, I'll take a few more.
Going? Okay. So Steve is asking, what about interactive digital books with video content, slideshows, audio quizzes, and links to outside content on your website, for example? Content that a person could listen to in their car while driving.
Yes. So with the digital book products, there's a lot of amazing things you can do, which you very eloquently stated in your question. And they're wonderful. They're really, really cool. It goes back again to what your goal is for the project. And if you specifically want, you want to work in digital only, that's great. Or if you want just a print piece, that's great. You want both. So it really depends on who your audience is. And I think when you think about your audience, are they somebody who is going to appreciate a print product more or a very interactive digital product? And I think that's where you would make that decision is what would your audience like to see the most? I mean, we live in such a digital world all the time. And so when we do those kinds of things, they really have to be good to grab people's attention. But yes, you can do amazing things. You can, as you mentioned, audio, you can put yourself in on a podcast, you can put video in with the books, you can have like pictures you click, goes into video. So especially if you're somebody who does both still and motion, there's a lot of amazing things you can do with the digital products. And they're also very easy to disseminate then across social media and link, and then you can track your engagement numbers. So it's an amazing thing. We could spend, again, an entire workshop on digital printing options or regular print options. But those things are all available. I think you just want to think about your audience and what kind of impact you want to have.
That's actually, I'm going back to a note I made when you were talking about that earlier. I said size and format based on goal, audience, and budget. That really is it. And I think that really applies here too with respect to the digital and audio, etc. Another comment from an anonymous attendee. Have you ever changed publishers for a previously published book? Is that easy or easier to do with on-demand printing? Is that a question I should be asking when choosing a publisher?
So it really just depends on what your contract stipulates. So you just want to, read that over and see. Usually when you publish a book with a publisher, they've contracted it for a certain period of time. And you can obviously you can use your lawyer and try to get out of that. That's one option, or you can wait till that time expires and then go with somebody else. The print on demand aspect, I think there might be some confusion about print on demand, the way I'm referring it to in this workshop, and traditional publishing, because print on demand can mean a lot of different things. If the publisher, say you have a contract with the publisher over a long period of time and they have all those books printed, I mean, those books they're going to have to sell those books. They're not going to probably give those to a different publisher, if that makes sense. But I think it's just a matter of looking at your contract and your terms and conditions. You don't really want to go into the publishing process switching like halfway through, but it's a conversation worth having with the publisher and probably some type of legal counsel.
Got it. Okay. One more from another anonymous user. Do you publish other people's books or just your own? I have had 2 books published by a publisher and 1 sold out, but they are not reprinting. I would like to republish, maybe on demand. I have all the components. What do you recommend? And secondly, what do you think of Book Baby?
So with regards to the first question, almost all the books I publish are my own, or they're books I've done in collaboration with clients or other people. So for example, I haven't done like another photographer's book. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but I tend to do the whole process soup to nuts. If you have all the assets for your book, the best thing to do is to take it to a very high-end printer and look at your options. I have some recommendations that I'll be putting in the chat for printers. And there's a great printer who may even actually be on this call with us. His name is Cooter Cherry with Beyond Photographic. The website's beyondphotographic.com. And he'd be a great person to help you, figure out a solution for the printing aspect of your book. And then Book Baby, I have heard of Book Baby, but it's not at the front of my prefrontal cortex right now, so I can't think of what it is.
Okay. So maybe the Zoom user can come back and clarify what Book Baby is if you'd like to.
Sure.
And that's all we have for now.
Great.
Thanks, Jill.
Sure. I'll get back to this and then we can open it again to Q&A later. So the next step is printing. And again, like I said, with all these things, printing is something we could spend an entire workshop on, but you really want to think about printing if you're doing a print book, obviously at the beginning of the process. And sometimes it's very helpful to meet with the printer as you're picking out the size of your book and just seeing what they have available in terms of papers, covers, bindings, kind of getting a sense of what they have, what the cost might be to do something. And then it's also very helpful, especially if it's your first book, to have them create a dummy, which is just a blank book, the size that you're looking for with a paper type, just so that when you're creating it and you're designing it, you have an end visual product you're working towards. You know exactly kind of what it's going to be when it comes out. So pre-production is very important. Getting it, your printer will also help you get your files right, get them organized, get them packaged correctly for printing. And it's just a big, having a relationship with a printer is very, very key. They are really the artists that you're collaborating with on the print production. And then the print process, right? Once everything's checked, you go into production. They'll start printing the book. You'll go to a press check. That's something that you definitely want to do and spend time on. I have my entire book press checked. I don't do just like a couple sample pages. I do the whole book, look at all the prints. And then when that's good to go, if you need to make corrections, sometimes you need to adjust things. Someone was asking about contrast or about pulling blacks. That's something that you would do at that time if you weren't happy with the results or you wanted a little bit more contrast or a little bit more, one thing or the other. A very important process. So it was kind of a trend several years ago to send books to Hong Kong or China to be printed because they could be printed cheaper. I highly recommend using somebody that's local where you can interact with them, again, especially if you're new to this process, and they will help you. They are masters of what they do, and printing is very, very much a separate art. And so when you have a great printer, it will take your book from zero to hero. It's probably already a hero book, but it'll take it to the next level. And it'll give you confidence through this process, because if you don't have confidence and you're just sending this out somewhere to be printed, it's going to be very nerve-wracking to get it back. And then if you get it back, there's nothing worse. I'm telling you, there's nothing worse than getting a bad print book in the mail and seeing your work just completely destroyed in print. It's awful. It's an awful thing. And so that is avoidable, and it's avoidable by having a good printer and having a relationship with a printer. And then last but not least, distribution. So we talked about like the big heavy coffee table books. It's like, where do you know, if you're not doing print on demand, you're printing thousands of books, where are you storing these books? Are the other people in your household going to be okay with that? And then you have to ship them out too. And so you just kind of want to think about this. Now you can send them somewhere for distribution. They can be oftentimes shipped directly from the printer, but those are all things you really want to think about. You don't want to order, 10,000 books or even 1,000 books. I mean, I have closets. I just do one of all my limited edition books, and I have closets full of just one of those copies. So when you start ordering multiples, it takes up a lot of space. And you also probably don't want to be the one individually sending them out. So just things to think about. And then once we get done with all that, you have your final book, come to the next art, which is the launch, right? And this is really where you're marketing yourself, you're promoting yourself. So many things you can do with a book launch, right? From print promotion, you can do postcards, you can do email, SMS marketing. Obviously, you can have a separate website for your book or just put it on your own website. It's great for social media. I mean, you can disseminate that book and just keep pumping it out and promoting on social media. And it's also really nice to do. I've always done or tried to do live events for my book launches. It's a great way to have people come together to see the work. You can have the books available for purchase, or if you're doing on demand, they can order them, and you can have like a digital presentation that you show people. But people love coming out for events, especially anything photo or art related. So it's a great opportunity to see people in person, to invite your clients to something. And then again, keep in mind with all of these, with the live event, you can, put it on Instagram Live and then, share all the pictures of the event on social media. So it really becomes a great way to promote yourself and your work. A couple of tips as we're kind of coming to the end of the presentation. A couple of tips. One is to remember that design is a process, right? If you've ever picked out furniture for your house or even picked out your own car, right? Design's a process. So sometimes you want a red car, then you see that they have a, really beautiful white pearl, and then you want that, right? And so that's very much the bookmaking process. Or you buy a big red chaise lounge, and then you see something in a cobalt blue that's even better. So that tends to happen when we're making books. Like you'll start designing, and then you see something, you might see even a better book that you like. And the important thing is to keep it as open and flowing as you can, right? You are going to change your mind about things, just not the size, right? So pick the size, but then after that, you can change your mind as much as you want about the layout and other things. So being open to the process, especially if it's your first time around. Always allow more time than you think. It does take a little more time as you get through the print production process. You don't want to be putting yourself on a really tight deadline. So in other words, like don't announce your book launch until you have like the book in hand, right? And it's come out. You don't want to like kind of miss the ball on that. As I spoke about, use a reputable printer, somebody that you really like working with. It's a key part of the process. And really just take it one step at a time. Like don't get overwhelmed with it. It can be an easy and quick process. You don't have to do everything, amazing and in the best of the best the first time you do a book. You can just get it out and put it out, and then refine it more as you go along, or do the next one in a different way. And then last but not least, I would say embrace minimalism. Photo books are meant to be visual stories. Your photography, your photos are meant to tell the story. You don't need huge amounts of text, huge amounts of typography, huge amounts of other things. It's really, when I do a photo book, I think of it more as a bound case of fine art prints that obviously tells a story, but it really isn't much more than that. That's what makes photo books so beautiful, is that minimal aspect, the visual aspect of it, of the storytelling. And then if you're doing books for clients, just a couple other tips: keep an open timeline, right? Because many of the decisions they're going to make. So if they say, Jim, can I get this book by the end of the year? What you want to say is, well, that depends on you, right? Because I'm the catalyst taking you along this process, but ultimately a lot of the decisions come to you. And when I go back to you to make a decision and you take 2 weeks, then no, you're not going to get your book, right? You're not going to get your book until the end of the year. So I just, again, take them along the process and say it's a process, and, we may make changes as we go, but, this is generally the timeline, and it changes based on how much time it takes to get assets back and forth. If you're working with clients, you definitely, even if you're working with yourself, you definitely want to assess budget and resources, right? Because again, time is money. It's costing you your time. They may have very, very elegant taste. They want the Rolls Royce of coffee table books, but if they don't have the budget for it, you don't really want to take them down that road, because they'll be disappointed in the end. So really assessing that from the beginning and getting them as much data as you possibly can on what the book they want will cost, and showing them examples. Again, it's a visual process, so showing them exact samples of, book like this costs X. And also helping them understand that the more changes they make or the more time it takes, also that adds on to the bottom line as well. And then overall, just managing expectations, right? Like sometimes clients think there's a magic book fairy who does things, and it's like, no, that's actually you who does it behind the scenes and makes them right. And if you're doing a book with a client, there's usually a lot of collaboration, and it takes time on their end too, just to make those decisions and to think about it. So helping them manage that project, managing that process and their expectations, and really especially with regards to the timeline. And then I always think it's helpful to talk about mistakes you've made. One mistake I've made, going back to the gentleman's question earlier, was not asking for help. So probably waiting a little too long to call the graphic designer, or waiting a little too long to find the right printer. You're going to need other people's help and other people's feedback. So just surrender and ask for it straight up right away. It'll make your process faster. Another mistake is not doing a full press check, thinking, oh, 1 or 2 pages looks great, let's go. And then you get the book, and of course there's something that needs to be adjusted. Not using a reputable printer, so trying like an online printer that you don't know, hit or miss. Not printing at a good time of year. So the absolute worst time to print is the end of the year. For almost 99% of home printers, it's the end of the year. Everybody's doing things for the holidays. Everyone's trying to get their end of the year projects. If it's a corporation, they're spending the last of their escort money for 2023 or the end of the year. It's generally the worst time of the year, or people wanting like a holiday gift kind of book. Bad idea. Like start way before. And oftentimes when that happens, the printers are overloaded. Sometimes they then outsource to other printers, or the machines are running overtime and they break down. There's just a lot of bad things that happen. So if you can print at a slower time of year for the printer, that's going to work to your advantage. And then, as I've been talking about quite a lot about time, is just not allowing enough time, trying to speed up a launch date or speed up a delivery date. Again, with books, you kind of want to give it the time it needs. As with anything, the hardest part is starting, right? So just starting, or just, as we talked about, coming up with some themes, pulling images, going out in the world and looking at books, photo books, art books that you love. That's really, that's probably going to get you going. So the hardest part is just taking that first step. And with that, I wish you luck. As the saying goes, a year from now, you'll wish you would have started today. So if you start today, you will likely have a book by the end of next year, and I look forward to seeing it. Here's my contact information in case you want to grab it or send me an email. Happy to answer any questions you have. Leave that up for one or two more seconds. And
yeah, well, I can really relate to the last slide you had. A year from now, you're going to wish you started today. Yeah, I can relate to that. Jill, thank you so much. Great presentation. We do have a couple of questions here. One from Randy, who says, digital photography versus old school film. Would you use, what do you use for the pictures in your books? One or both?
I would say 99.9% are digital in my books.
Okay.
Yeah. I love
Um,
film photography, but ultimately when you're creating a book, you're going to have to scan those negatives anyway. So they're not really film unless you were to hand print the images that you took on film and buying those. It would still be a digital book
right.
making process.
Okay. And then we have a couple of comments. Thank you for a wonderful and very, very useful presentation. I think you did just an amazing job, Jill. Thank you so much. It was really great having you. And if there are no more questions, and I don't see anything else here, I'd like to move to some closing remarks. And I see we still have 32 participants, so that's pretty good. I think we were up to 38 at one point, so a few people did drop off, but I got most people to stick around till the end because I gave you a tease about this Time Magazine portrait contest that we're running. So, yeah, again, thank you so much, Jill, for a wealth of information. That was just an amazing presentation, and
Thank you.
now you got me inspired.
Good, good. Thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us.
So I'm going to put up this slide about the photo contest. This is really an amazing thing that ASMP is doing with time. I promised more information about this, so here's what we're doing. The contest is entitled The Human Element, and it runs from now through November 7th. Our entries will be accepted through November 7th, 2023. And here's what's at stake. The winner will receive a 3-month membership with the photo editors of, a 3-month mentorship with the photo editors of Time and a 1-day paid assignment from Time. In all, 30 people will win cash prizes totaling more than $16,000. The winners will be featured on time.com, and the judges include Time photo editor Sylvia Kang, Time Deputy Director of Photography and Photoville founder Laura Romanos, and photographer Martin Scholl. ASMP and NANPA members get 20% off entry fees, and you can enter at timeasphotocontest.com. And I think Jason was going to put that up in the Q&A here, or in the chat for them to see. This is the largest media partnership that ASMP has ever had. Time reaches over 120 million people through their magazine, online, and social media. And they're actively promoting this competition as well. It's very exciting, and we hope to see your work featured there. So check it out. And okay. So wrapping up, finally, on behalf of ASMP and the Los Angeles chapter, I want to thank you all for attending this evening. The recording of this session will be available on the Academy page of the ASMP website within about a week. If you're not yet a member of ASMP, please check us out at asmp.org. And once again, if you are a member and located in the greater Los Angeles area, please consider joining the board of our ASMP LA chapter. We meet via Zoom on the first Monday of each month, and we welcome non-board members to join our board meetings to learn more about what we're up to. You can get to our website from the chapter section of the ASMP website. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great evening. And thank you again, Jill.
Thank you, Jim.